I tried to make on time. I'm from University of Chicago. I'm a Booth Business School a professor of finance. So the talk I'm giving is very much on like economics, finance taste. But glad that it's a great scheduling in the sense that this paper could be think about the natural extension of the first talk that you see from the mining and what if miners are risk averse, and what if they form pools, and what would be the evolution of the structure of the industry. It's also related to the second paper, which is on this waste of resources, etc. We would like to link the formation of pool to the excessive use of the energy, etc. So these are these two things that are putting together. Right. So I think there's some top gets cut, but anyway. So I didn't adjust my slides that much. So these slides are just not like, I think for this audience I don't need to talk more. I would like to talk about a little bit about this proof work on this we call Armsrace. I think Armsraces will be there in any zero-sum game. It's basically that as long as you're imposing weekly increasing of your reward function, as well as that it's always budget balancing, then you have this issue where it's a total pool. Everybody, if they do a little bit, going to get a little bit more, but obviously because it's a budget balanced, so obviously you're just stealing someone from other. And this creates this competition where in a way that from an economist perspective, that you potentially will lead a lot of inefficiency going on. So I'm not. This is the second slide. Is just basically saying that in reality, even though that what we know it's a decentralized, a lot of people would like to keep individual miners, so nobody can dominate the network. However, that in reality it's always mining pools. Oh, it's not always. It's just nowadays it is. It completely dominates the solo mining. So I'm gonna have from my perspective, a very quite interesting pictures for you. One is this mining war during the BCH forking. I happen to know one of the Bitmain's top guys, so he gave me some data on that thing. And then the mining pool evolution, you probably already seen that. It's just basically telling you that this industry, everything is about the big guys. It's become a kind of oligopoly or monopoly. That type of, I will explain to you that what do we mean by oligopoly and monopoly. And there's a concerns over sustainability and all these things. Okay, what we are trying to do in this paper is from economist perspective, where the miners not only can just join in one pool, but also can join in a lot of pools, which it seems like in practice they are doing now, to clarify certain fallacies on whether you're going to have one big pool or not. The answer is no. So you're going to see why this is going on. It's related to this coalition proof logic that behind the analysis you're seeing in the first paper. And then highlight one important mechanism to linking the pools and the rising mining power, which now people seems to agree that this is a pretty excessive. All right, so this is one thing. Oh, you don't see the top. How can I just make it smaller so that the top title showed up?
Try to close and open it.
Close it?
Control L.
Maybe this is fine already. Control L. Whoa! All right, this is a BCH. Great. All right, BCH hard work in late 2018. So, if you are in this space, you know that there's they announced it, and here is the fork starts. And then all of a sudden, this is a hash power, total hash power between these two, and then you have this thing. And when I thought about all these things, saying, oh, this is like a very interesting kind of like fighting war without any, I guess, general or that things, but actually not. So this is the decomposition of the war, hash power war of these pools of the the mining powers associated to each team. So basically, it's like two armies working, and you have different squads, and these squads are just set on lines of each other and fighting over each other. So these are the mining pools, and obviously, like I'm not trying to tell you too much about fork, etc., but I want to tell you that as economists, to think about incentives and how do you coordinate all these things is just completely changed when you think about it. It's like individual guys, peasants versus very, very disciplined soldiers, right? So these are the things that I want to say. This is just telling you the illusion of Bitcoin mining of the pools. Each color represents one pool, so you're already seeing this type of thing. And then you see that the rise of hash power. The red line is the hash power over time, and we like to, link these two with a purely economist type of a model. And then we want to see that why that pool seems to grow first and then slow down. It's not like someone is taking up the world. Okay, so preview of the results is that we know that if you have a risk aversion, that's exactly the first paper was talking about, is that you have a very risk aversion. It seems like you want a pool because we would like to diversify. So indeed, that pooling implies the significant risk-sharing benefits. And the first order thing is saying that, okay, once you diversify, then actually you worsen the arms race. So remember that the underlying is basically people killing each other, in my perspective. If you think about it like you're killing each other as a proof of work, maintain the stability, that's totally fine. In this model, there's no network stability thing. It's just people engaging in the hash power war, etc. Then with the idea of allowing them to participate in the pools, that basically improve the individual payoff but hurt everybody else. Okay, so that's and we want to show it's quantitatively significant. So therefore, this could link to the egregious energy use with the pools, and basically once you have a pool, that if there's no pool, then when I do it, I might not do it just because it's an individual miner. There's a lot of risk going on. Given that potentially the price of Bitcoin is big, but alternatively, you could have put it into the pools. Then a lot of people just get it. Okay. The second point is that the risk aversion implies pools, but it doesn't imply pools to merge or centralization. So that's the point that I probably when I read all these literature, etc., was not emphasized that much, but slowly that I see people start to discuss it. The reason is that miners can join multiple pools, and they can diversify themselves, and you can see this logic very clearly when you write down the model. So this is the links to the very, very old economics and finance kind of a logic, which is the following, is that we know all these investors, like everybody. You think about your investors who buy, purchasing some stocks, buying some stocks, etc., right? You are risk averse. That's why we need to put into the funds, etc. But you should not ask saying, oh, because I'm a risk averse, so therefore Google should merge with Facebook, right? Or Facebook is not a good example because these two things, it seems like it's moving together. Let's think about someone else that you could have provided a good hedge. We never should do that because if you are the risk averse investor, you just put half the money into the Facebook, half the money into someone else, so that you diversify by yourself. You don't need to merge these two companies together they diversify for you. Okay, so that's basically the idea that miners in here is like investors. Then we build the equilibrium model of mining industry, and then you will see that how do we put it. Mining pools, I will basically just skip this slide just because everything here should be very obvious. Is that they repeatedly compete to record transactions, then they get this coin base, and then you have a tournament. Oh, there's another thing that it's very important from the economist's perspective is that they will find a way to resolve this moral hazard issue that later on will explain to you, basically using the partial solution. Okay. And here, the difficulty adjustment is exactly the source of so-called arms race. It's basically saying if you have a lot of people get in, the difficulty going to adjust. Initially, if there's only several people, then you put it in. Okay, everybody is happy, but then other people come in. The very first moment that the other people come in make everybody else harder. So that's the so-called arms race in terms of like this is the kind of like the military war. This is basically the analogy that we are doing. Okay. So let me just telling you the details of the setting we are working on. So we have the let's say you're solo mining, okay, and we are in the end I will put a risk version there. So solution, the Poisson gonna arrives with rate proportional to the share of hash rates. So we assume it's a proportional rule. And minus payoff look like this. X solo equals B solo times R minus the C lambda AT. So this is, think about it, just a one period model. This is only just static model, okay? Then we have this standard way of modeling the payoff function, the outcome here. Big lambda is global hash rates. In the end, we will endogenize global hash rates. It's just, a lot of people are coming in, right? Okay. And you have these constants. It's not a really big important thing. The R is dollar reward. Everything is standard. Here is the cost of operation electricity of the linear in the hash rates that we're considering. All right. And then what's the pool? Okay, a proportional mining pool. So here I will explain to you that in the end why we focus on the proportional mining pool. Instead of this PPS thing, okay? A proportional mining pool is basically combines everybody's hash rates together to solve one puzzle and it distributes their rewards in proportion to the hash rates contributions. And here is basically this partial solution that initially we were discussing about, that you could use the partial solution to approximate this hash contributions. To an economist, typically you will say that this is usually it's hard. It's like you're working, and in the end you just survey your workers how much hard you are working, and everybody just inflate, right? You being RA, a lot of times you just like do a little bit of inflation of the working hour, etc. But in this environment, we know we have the solution of the hash rates. So then if you joining a pool, what you get is that this is the pool, big lambda. Big lambda, I typically just denote whatever the existing big pool's hash rates. And what you get is basically lambda A divided by the whole thing, because after you're joining, this add up. And then the pool going to generate this part of the reward, and you have R then. Also, you just minus your contribution. And here the pool becomes the chance of a pool to get the reward becomes 1 over d that. Okay, so and you can show that because the risk aversion, then those X solo X pool, the expectation is identical, but the distribution is a second order. Stochastically dominated, therefore that I would like to joining a pool to smooth out stuff. Okay, so far that just saying that as a risk-averse individual agents in this world, they should participate in a pool to self-insure. And here is a slide to tell you that the gain from participating in a pool versus not to participate in a pool. First of all, that if I'm joining a bigger pool, the gain will be bigger. That's this slide is trying to show. The second point I want to deliver is that even if I'm joining a pretty small pool, the gain, the first thing you do going there will be very, very big, which is like a 20% of the boost. So 20% boost is measuring in terms of the certainty equivalent. Okay. However, this doesn't mean that one caveat as the core logic of the behind this, like whether we should have see a big pool or not. Just because due to the risk aversion reason is that the miners are deciding how to locate across pools, not whether or not joining the pools. Okay? So this is just saying that they would like to put joining the pools. It doesn't mean that they always put all the eggs into one basket. Okay, so I will spend some time to talk to you about the fee contract structure. For the audience like this, that I can talk a little bit more. Although that I'm not really the expert on the way that exactly designed on this like first N rule or the things, but let me just give you that what we find. So there's a pool manager, okay. He is coordinating all these hash rates and then basically charge pool fees. So this is the one thing that in a way that actually interests me. It's a business. Okay, it's a business. It's not like something that people putting together and play with. It's a business. The pool fee could be very substantial. Okay, and the contracting variable of all the workers coming in, you think about a Lyft or Uber, right? Think about that. It's basically that you get your reward based on your partial solutions, and then this is basically the hash partial solution block is below a lower threshold than the true solution. So I believe that everybody here is let's say that in the true solution you need to hit 16 zeros, but in counting your partial solutions you only need to hit in, let's say, 12 zeros, which is during the finding the true solution, you got to collect a lot of partial solution, which represents that you're working. All right. So this is already you're seeing it in the first talk, and here is basically saying that I can use these partial solutions to allocate the rewards. Okay, so there are three kinds of the compensation contracts. The first one is 10 slightly different contracts in three categories. The first one is a proportional, and that's what we are emphasizing on, what we are working on. And here is basically that what you get as the participants is basically the same thing, lambda A over lambda A plus lambda B. You see already seeing without the 1 minus F. But now, because you are participating and you acknowledge the manager is helping you, therefore, that you are paying this, you only get a 1 minus F. The management get F a little bit. Okay, so with B tilde. This is basically it's like output wage, that you work there, we collectively produce something, then we share. The second one is a PPS, and that's the kind of like hourly based wage, which means that you just, this is related to the deterministic payoff that initially, that the first paper was talking about. Here is basically you work there independent of the outcome, just to show you that this is the hours that I'm working. There's also cloud mining. Seems like it's extremely opposite of PPS, which means that the guy who is an individual miner would really, really like to get some computation power. Instead of he's renting out, he's basically borrowing. Okay, he's just trying to get that and pay the other side as a machine provider some money for them. So this is the opposite. We focus on proportional pool just because it's like prevalent, and also that in here is relevant for the risk aversions or these things. So in the future, in potential extension that I saw, that I remember that some of the comments in the first paper was saying, oh, what if you have different risk aversions? What will going to play out? And those things will be suitable to study in this framework with slightly different contracts of proportional pools. Right. So what we do is basically that assuming proportional pools and assuming every agents in this economy are all have the same risk aversion, including the managers. Okay, including managers. Otherwise, you think about if manager are risk aversion. That's basically my comments to the first talk on team, which is that if the managers are risk averse, yes, then it's optimal for him to just rent out, give the workers as a determinant, and he bear all the risk. Basically, that's the point. And now here in this framework, because the managers have the same risk aversion, so they also would like to equalize the risk. This is the data and basically behind what we're trying to show. First of all, first column is on the total hash rates. It's rising. Number of pools, total now is 43. Top 5%, so that just is showing you that how concentrated they are. Top 5% is just pick the top 5, calculate their sum of hash power, divided by the total, is about 62 now, 2017. The highest is 75. Okay. Here's the average fee that the managers are charging. So every block coming out, the manager is going to charge that part of fee. It's vary over time a little bit, but it's around like 2%, 3%. And here's a fraction of proportional. But one thing that typically, economists write papers will say, I would like to explain the world some particular pattern. One pattern we would like to explain, or kind of like telling you that this is true in the world and I can generate it. This is the fact that the top 5 guys are charging a little bit higher fee. The bigger funds, bigger pools are charging a slightly higher fee, or it's 2% versus 1.2. This is the top 5 pools. This is the all pools, and that is the thing that we would like to deliver. Okay. Here is the current contract sample, and then here is basically that we were in the first talk towards the end about this why the mining pools would like to cheat by hiding the discovered a true solution a little bit. It's basically reflected all these like a little bit fancy of D something, but given time that I will not go for that. All right. So here's really the given all this preparation, then we would like to set up the model. Okay. So model going to be very simple. As I said, you have the risk-averse agents, okay, so that the risk participating in the pool become a real concern. The second is that you have a lot of active miners who are trying to find a home to go to the pools to work, okay, and they will acquire hash rates lambda A. Here we're assuming it's linear. It will be very easy to add a fixed cost. What's important is that the M pool managers will set FM to compete. So in this environment, is basically all the active miners. They could buy certain hash power. They're facing a bunch of the pool managers offering that service, and then they could go there to mine. And obviously, they get a reward because it's the contract that they get back a part of it. So we're going to analyzing the baseline first, just take these as assumption, and then add on a little bit of a friction, which helps you to clarify a lot of things. So we will first analyze this, and then saying that, okay, let's add on a little bit of a friction, which means the following. In friction in the economics, it typically means that there's some firms that had a little bit of the difference among these pools relative to the other firm. Okay, so pool M, we say it's a pool endowed with some passive hash rates, which means that these hash rates will not move. Or you think about it, it's like themselves, etc. You think of lawyer fans, proprietary hash power, etc. All these things, those a little bit of the endowment is related to this so-called monopolistic competition, which means that the very, very easy way to explain it is just, I'm offering the handbag. There's some handbag called Gucci. It's really, really high level. I have other handbag, let's say a little bit of Coach, a little bit lower, and all those like handbag which has no brand name. Okay, and the different people will come into different market, right? But if the Gucci, some of the handbag price is a little lower, you're going to, on the margin, attract the customer a little bit. Here is basically the same thing, that we have a different pools because of their owners probably have a lot of money initially. Let's say the Bitmain guy. And he had this manufacturing, and he is able to attract a lot of risk-averse miners to come in to join in that pool. Okay, and that is in a sense that it's given that other active miners are participating in that, the other active miners also would like to participating because of the risk aversion effect, and those things are the key thing that we would like to analyze. All right. So what's the active miners problem? That this is what basically that this paper's thought is. We have the utility function of the whole thing that if they participating of the lambda m, which is the contribution of their acquired hash rates to pool m. Okay, they buy the whole thing at a linear cost, so they just pay minus c thing, and then obviously each pool they calculate the sum of these rewards, and then you have those things. Okay. They're taking the total pools hash rates as a given. Okay, and you can show that. Okay, just because it's exponential, there's a nice property of this this Poisson distribution, etc. You're basically getting this problem. You don't need to. Remember those things. We needed a risk aversion, obviously. Otherwise, it's just everything become reduced to the risk neutral. That's not. What's also more important in the end, we have to close the model because there's a global hash rates lambda is equals to the many pools together, putting together. Yeah.
Why the cost C is included in the utility function?
Yeah. This is the so there's a way to write because short answer is this thing is deterministic. Right? It is this utility is over the money, right? This is a money, is measured in money, right? And then here from here to here, I'm already transformed into something called a certainty equivalent that initially people were using. This is in terms of money as well. This inside is in terms of money, and when you put a utility there, it's right. So and that's the active problem. What's pool managers' problem? Okay, pool managers are facing a little bit more sophisticated problem. Is that what they have to do is to know that the other guy's competitive advantage, etc., and also that to take as a given that how much the fees that the other firms are charging. Think about it basically, different, let's say, gasoline firms that you drove on the road. You're always seeing different prices in different roads, etc. They're pricing very strategically. But what they have to do is to taking others' prices as a given, and then they can adjust their price a little bit. So that's basically what we do. And this manager with M has a cash flow that. So then he has to maximize the following. Okay. So let me emphasize a little bit that what these things are. Okay. First of all, you should see that there are 3 places that FM showed up. Okay, and this is very important to understand what's going on. The first thing is the FM here. This is just basically capture the idea that if I'm charging a little bit higher, if I'm fixing how many people participating, then my benefit go up. You just charge a price, higher price. Here, this is saying that if I'm charging a little bit higher price, the people coming in, this is AM is active miner, coming in is lower down. Okay, and then here is basically saying that when I changed this FM, I took into account that when I lower down the price or increase the price, the global hash rate is changing because I'm a big enough firm, big enough pool. There's only like let's say 6 top 70, top 50. So they will take that into account. This last part of here is really what drives the main results that is saying that the larger firms, so here's the main results. The larger firms will charge a higher price because not because they're getting more, etc. I will show you that everything is proportional. The reason they charge a higher price is because they took into account the fact that if they lower down the price, there's more hash rates coming in, and they're hurting themselves. Okay, they understood that this is zero-sum game, which is the Armsraces. So they took into account, therefore they increased the price to deliberately shrinking the total hash rates in this world. Okay, so here's the equilibrium definition. You see that optimal fees, optimal hash rates allocation, market clearing, and and what we are linking back in the end is that this passive rates we could think about is like how big is the funds initially has, and then try to understand that what's the implication on the different distribution of the pool size that in the next period of growth. All right, so here is as a promise. This is a frictionless benchmark, which says that this is saying that suppose take the most plain vanilla model, like the first paper we see, that you have a bunch of people who can participate in the who can joining the pool by themselves, right, and try to figure out the optimal way to do so. Okay. The proposition is as follows: that in this world where there's no big pool managers to start with, right? Because in this world there's no big man, no other people to charge all these fees, or the ability to set up a fund. Then FM equals 0 for all M, and then any allocation, as long as you make sure the total size of different firms that are adding up to some number, which is making sure that nobody wants to get in further, will be the equilibrium. So here is basically saying that the miners, you don't need to pull them together. Okay, so one obvious way to show it is basically one scenario: you have one big fund, you have 10,000 people, everybody gets in here. You have another situation: split this guy into two. The same 1,000 people, just put half here, half here. The result is exactly identical. There's no incentive to change that. So that's the way we call it fallacy of risk diversification improvement. So interestingly, I would like to get some comments from. I would like to get some things saying it seems like this point is valid, or people realize it. So this is an interesting forum post after we wrote the paper. Obviously, initially we didn't. We were debating on whether this results is interesting or not. The mining. So this is from a forum post. Obviously, this is a guy who is actively mining. Okay, mining in multiple not only helps variance for individual miners, but it is healthier for the network. In the current standard usage, there's a rich get richer, the poor get a poor tendency, where large pools are more attractive, that's grow even larger. So that's the lot of debate on that. But basically, this guy is saying that, if the miners actually think a little bit, or that they could have put it into different pools, then this force is not there. But
sorry, are you saying that's wrong?
I'm saying this is the correct.
Saying this is correct.
Yeah, I'm saying this is correct, and I'm saying that we are basically pointing out the same issue here, and happily that the industry person we converge, and a lot of times that the finance industry and the academia just goes the opposite, because the industry person would like to make money in the financial market, while academia tell them no, you don't need to, because there's no money to make. So this is why that I would like to get some.
Everybody being in every pool.
Ideally, that if the guy who doesn't have the mental cost of different things, which I think that at this point probably that I know some people allocating 2 or 3, but not everything. Obviously, putting their hash rates in every pool, that's an exaggeration. This is exaggeration from the model. What we know from the standard finance textbook, which is like back to 1970s, Jing Pharma basically showed that if you really think that diversification is very beneficial, the first 12 stocks is the most important one. After 12, it's like a zero, almost zero gain. So here, I don't put any mental cost of allocating a little bit more, so therefore you should diversify 100. But technically, you should only like 12. But the 12, I think it's already big enough. Nowadays, it's like 12. Okay. All right, okay. So then I want to, given the time that I want to, yeah. So I want to tell you the dark side of risk sharing or mining pools is basically saying that we have a mining race, and what we can show is that if there's no mining pool, then the marginal benefit, if it's a solo, the total mining pool lambda is only this one, but once you have a mining pool to allow them to diversify to a much greater extent, then the total mining hash power is way bigger. It's because that you allow them to diversify to a great extent. Let me just tell you, we did some empirical results, but that's not important. I think this is a very important concept that this is worth 1 minute to talk about. Is that this model, if you would see that, is like IO, industrial organization, where we would like to understand the evolution of the mining industry, and the entry and exit from the is kind of an interesting perspective to look at through. So what we hear is basically we say we have MI incumbents, and they could pay some cost to acquire these passive rates and compete with the rest of it. Typical results will say, okay, as long as you allow for, let's say, k equals 0, and when k equals 0, that means that the entrants will not have a passive rates, then everything gonna go. What we show proposition is that the incumbent pools in our model has a very, very stylized fact about the finance industry, is that the incumbent pools will always enjoy some market power. The reason is because the incumbent pools have a little bit of initial magnets. Whenever you have initial magnets, which is this passive rates, that they can provide better services to all other people. It's like a Bank of America, think about Wells Fargo, etc. The fact that they already have a certain base of the branch network, even though the new guys coming in, they cannot compete with them on this front. So this is just showing you that in our model, it's a free from the competition force. All right, so here, let me just wrap up. So I hope that this is two things I want to deliver. One is a risk aversion implies pools, yes, but the diversification across pools will sustain decentralization. And at some point I would like to do some empirical work on that, just try to see if is it indeed true that from the same IP people cross out. This speaks to the blockchain sustainability, and what we also try to show is the fact that the kind of having pools that actually could generate some social bad, which is there's a lot of egregious energy consumption due to the fact that you could allow people to diversify at doing bad things. Okay. Good. Yeah.
Since I sit in the front, I'll take over, so any questions?
Yeah.
Might be a basic question, but you mentioned there was an estimated hash rate based on...
Oh, yeah, yes.
Is that what's used for the
We use, yeah, I think it's a lot of practical people. I wouldn't say industry persons that they also use the same methodology.
What if I stop mining when I find partial solutions and I never try to find the real solutions? Would I get paid?
You could get paid. You just do, and then you left, right? Because say your kids is in hospital, you have to stop. Assume. And then, assume, I don't know, then you just submit there. So whatever your partial solution is there, you get a proportion of a partial solution.
Okay. It's the same price to try to mine for the partial ones and the real ones.
Yes. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same. The contract is like try to, people coming in to understand that there's some diversification effect, which means that exposed I'm the winner, but I have to diversify everybody. I have to. Okay, good. Sorry. Yeah.
What takes for this result to hold? Like, how far can you stress the risk assumptions, and how easy is it to like break into like being more advantageous to have consolidation?
The first result is very general. The first result is very general in the sense that whenever you think, so there are different forces why that we think pool rise, right? One thing I think Neha mentioned was there's some little bit of the admin cost, like setup cost, which we typically interpret as a fixed cost. If it's a fixed cost, then it's obviously it's much better for just to let one guy do it and then let it do big, because then the average cost will become very, very, very small. So this is the standard force that we're seeing in many other kind of contexts. What I'm trying to refute in this particular paper is that it's not. The idea is saying that the risk aversion, therefore people joining a bigger pool, that logic is broken. I tried to say that it is indeed true you have a risk aversion. You should participate in pools, but you don't need to let the pools to merge, because if you could have a lot of pools, but these guys just put their hash rates in different places. And I truly believe the cost of splitting my own hash power will be much smaller than let these pools to merge, right? Because all these this firm merge is much harder in typical. Okay, thank you.